Hey, this is Gary Cain. I'm a guitar player, singer, and songwriter living in Austin, Texas, originally from Canada, and you are listening to Talkin' Blues.
So, how long have you been living in Austin?
Um, that's not as easy a question to answer as it might be. It might seem. My wife actually moved down here before I did. She got a job down here, which is what kind of led us down here. And then I stayed in Canada and kind of split my time between Canada and Texas until I could finally make the move. So she's been here, I want to say, going on almost 8 years.
Oh, okay.
7 years. And I've been here full time, probably coming up on 3.5 or 4.
But was it a difficult decision to move to Austin? I mean, I think as a musician it wouldn't be, but
Yeah, it was.
what was the thinking behind holding back and waiting?
It was, well, originally it was just all logistical. It was like I was still working and making ends meet in Canada. So I kind of had to wrap up things there. And we had a house and there was all kinds of stuff there. And originally I was going to see if I could kind of make it work going back and forth, and eventually just decided that I had to, kind of jump in with both feet. But I mean, ironically or strangely enough, my wife before my one birthday asked me what city I'd want to go to or where I want to go in the world more than anywhere else. And I'd never been to Austin. So we did a trip down to Austin, and I think she got her job offer completely unrelated about 3 weeks later. So it just happened to be that after we visited, she got a job offer down here. And so if it had been somewhere else, we might not have considered it. But I was really keen to move to Austin because so much of my favorite music and musicians are from here. There's a great blues tradition here, and specifically the type I like. So I was really excited about the possibility. She really liked the job, so we decided let's try and make it work.
That's crazy that it would just work out like that.
Yeah, we were pretty surprised. So,
Because I was kind of curious as to whether you moved just to enhance your career or to take your career to the next level. I mean, I presume you did, and that's part of it, but that wasn't the sole reason for you being down there.
no, I mean, I probably couldn't have done it without my wife first having gotten a job here to kind of get us established. At that point, I was kind of moving into doing music full time already at that point, and just kind of starting to build things in Canada. I'd done some touring in Europe and things like that, and we're starting to book festivals. I'd just been in the IBC, and I'm sure you're familiar with that,
Yeah.
the International Blues Challenge. So we made it to the semifinals of that, and that opened up some opportunities. And yeah, so then moving to Austin was actually at first was kind of a step backward before I could take a step forward because I had to I had to find a new band to play with. I had to meet all new people. I didn't have any relationships with the venues, so I kind of had to start from scratch down here, which, as I found, was a lot easier than probably starting from scratch at home because there's so many great players, tons of venues, and people really appreciate live music down here in a way that is kind of unique, I think.
Yeah.
Compared to other places I've been.
Okay, so tell me about that. So you decided you're going to move down there, and as you said, you have a lot of musical influences from musicians down in Austin, Texas, like Stevie Ray Vaughan and like Chris Duarte.
Yeah, for sure.
So tell me about the thinking when you finally decide, okay, I'm going to do this. I'm going to move down there. You don't know that many people. You don't know the bars. How do you go about establishing yourself and creating opportunities for yourself?
Well, actually, it's funny you mentioned Chris Duarte because he actually hooked me up with my first bass player. So,
Oh, really?
yeah, because actually him and I had connected on Instagram a little bit before I'd made the move to Austin, and so he's a super nice guy and probably one of my biggest influences in the guitar for sure. I just think the world of his playing, and but he's a super nice guy, and he had sent me kind of like supportive messages, like I was playing a big festival, and he would kind of message me and say, "Hey, knock 'em dead, have a good show," that kind of stuff. So really nice of him to reach out and do that. So when I moved to Austin, I actually showed up at a show he was playing, and he kind of like looked at me like at two heads, like, "What are you doing in Texas?" I told him, I'm like, "I moved here." So yeah, I chatted with him, and he actually connected me with a guy locally here, Matt Temple, that I ended up playing bass with, or he played bass with me, I should say. And then from there, just kind of networked with other musicians, found some drummers to play with, and in the musician community, everybody kind of knows everybody to a degree. So there's kind of only a couple degrees of separation down here, and you end up just meeting people. You play gigs, right? You see people, and it just kind of happened fairly organically.
how easy is it to get gigs coming into a new territory, new city, new town?
I didn't find it too bad, to be honest with you. At first, it's like you kind of have to. I think people that are booking gigs, they get so many emails, right? And so your first challenge is even just getting them to open your email, right? Is,
Right.
is a challenge. So so I reached out to some places that I thought stylistically would fit with me. And at first, it's a little bit slow and you got to follow up but I've been through that before, kind of doing that in other places. And so it wasn't too bad. And then eventually you kind of get into some places. You play some places that maybe aren't the best fit for you and you don't follow up to play there again maybe but I've kind of found a number of places that we do really well at and that kind of fit my aesthetic and that we get a bit of a following. So now things are kind of up and running. We're playing out in like in Houston. We're playing in Austin, down in San Antonio, kind of anywhere within say a 2 to 3 hour radius of Austin. And so it hasn't been that bad. And I think one thing is that a lot of people that book music for places are real music enthusiasts. Not all, but a lot of times I've found at least in Ontario, sometimes you would end up dealing with somebody who is juggling 80 different job roles, right? They were the manager and they were supervising shifts. And so music was an afterthought for them,
Right.
understandably so. And so, but some places down here, they have people that are real music curators and they're really good to deal with.
How do you sell yourself? How does that happen? Like, what goes into selling yourself to these people who don't know you?
Well, I've got some videos of me performing live that I've taken at different concerts and festivals and stuff that I use. So I've kind of got like a form email that I can send out, kind of with here's my website, here's a bunch of video, here's some recorded songs, here's some press reviews about what people have said about me and things like that. So generally, you know what they're looking for in that first thing. You want to make it a fairly quick email so they don't have to waste a lot of time and then get right to it. But video seems to be the number one thing. So once you send that, then assuming you can get them to look at it, then usually you can do pretty well. So and then I stay really organized. I mean, it's not tremendously exciting or sexy, but I use like a CRM program that just keeps me on. It reminds me when I have to send follow up emails and do all this stuff because you have to end up sending so many emails and there's so many venues to keep track of that. If you don't have a system, you just won't. You'll drop balls all over the place. So you really have to stay on top of it.
Are you goal oriented?
I don't know that I really am, to be honest with you. I've never had like a 5-year plan or like a 10-year plan, or I'm not even really sure what I'm gonna have for supper tomorrow, to be honest with you. But I definitely am moving in a direction, and I'm moving in that direction with a lot of effort. So, and my guiding principle kind of has been that I'm going to take gigs and play things that align with like what I want to do and what fulfills me, and not kind of get pulled off the rails by doing things that seem like career success. So I've kind of done that before in the past, where I've taken gigs that pay well, and they kind of, to the younger me, they seem like success basically, where it's a regular gig, it's a higher profile, or you're making more money. But if it's not music you're really, really into, then to me, it just kind of ends up being a step back. And so I kind of resist the temptation. I've been offered gigs in other bands that would be kind of, exciting gigs, like touring in Europe and things like that. But at the end of the day, I think I've decided I want to do my own thing. So I'm putting all my energy into just kind of develop myself um, and see what happens.
Let's talk about that. Let's go back a ways. You said you were based out of Scarborough or Toronto area, moved to Kitchener,
That's right.
and grew up in Kitchener. I believe you started playing piano at a very young age of 7 or somewhere around there. At that
I
point,
did, yeah.
I presume that it was something your parents told you to do, as opposed to you wanting to be a pianist. Is that correct?
I don't really remember any desire to be a pianist at all, but I do remember that I thought the piano was pretty cool, and I may have even been younger than that, because I think it might have been before I even was in school. Because I remember being home with my mom, and I think she just, to keep me busy and out of her hair, she would sit me at the piano and show me something, and that would keep me busy for like 20 minutes to learn it. And once I learned it, I'd come running in, show it to her, and then she'd show me something else. And so I learned all these little tunes on the piano, and I loved it. Like I would just get lost in it. the time would fly by. I'm sure for my mom it was a godsend to have this kid occupied. you know, but so instead of sitting me in front of the TV, she sat me in front of the piano, and that's kind of where I started loving being able to actually make music. And then she had an old classical guitar sitting in the corner of the living room beside the piano, actually, that she bought when she lived in New Zealand, actually. And so I think I don't really remember how, but sometime I just ended up picking it up and I just kind of played whatever came. I'm sure it was terrible. Now I think back to it, but I just started playing whatever I was playing. And eventually, years later, I got into some different music. Really got into the band AC/DC. I was like obsessed
Who
with them.
didn't?
Yeah, I mean, there's something wrong with you if you didn't have an AC/DC phase,
Yeah.
I think. And they were great. And again, my poor mother, I remember finding I loved their live "If You Want Blood" tape, I guess at that time. And I remember just like I forcing my mother to listen to like the solo from "Whole Lotta Rosie" or whatever. I was like, you have to listen to what Angus is doing here, like, and she was very gracious about it. She listened to that, but yeah, I started picking out AC/DC tunes by ear on the classical nylon string acoustic, which not kind of a artistic choice made by no other option rather than any wise decision on my part. And yeah, my friend who was a really good drummer and is a professional drummer to this day, we used to go to his house and I would tape a microphone to the guitar and hook it up to his parents' stereo, and we would just. I think I'm finding really tolerant parents as a through line through my entire story. I think
your mother must have been musical if she had the piano and the classical guitar.
Yeah, she played piano, and she played piano and was actually I think quite good. And it's funny, just a little while ago, I forget who I was talking to, but I was thinking back, and sometimes you remember things from your childhood that you kind of forgot about or you didn't really realize the significance of. And I was telling a friend of mine that I think probably my favorite memory in my entire life, and probably the thing that just like for me embodies just like safety and love, is just I remember as a little kid sitting on the stairs before I was going to bed and listening to my mom play the piano. And when I think back to that, I just think that was like the greatest memory I think I could ever have. It was just I loved to listen to her play the piano. And she would play stuff like Music Box Dancer or The Entertainer, like Frank Mills stuff, that kind of stuff. And I just loved it. I just thought it was amazing. So,
well, I guess you pursuing music had to happen with that kind of influence, right?
Yeah, I mean, when I think back, I think I had a pretty strong imprinting of loving music way early. And even as a kid, I remember putting on the headphones and listening to the vinyl albums, just cranked and laying there. My parents have pictures of me just laying on the floor, kind of eyes closed with the headphones on, zoning out to the records and stuff. So it's always been something that just, I don't know, for me, connects me with whatever people want to get connected with in their life, whether it's, some people have religion or meditation or whatever else. For me, it's always been music that does it.
I presume this is not a fair question, but some great musicians have come out of Kitchener-Waterloo area. What do you think it is about that area that so many great musicians have come out of there?
Well, I think Mel Brown definitely, we were talking earlier about Mel Brown. He's definitely has something to do with that because he kind of brought this legit blues thing up to Kitchener. And they also had the Pop the Gator club there as well. So a lot of touring guys would come through, like legit guys. I think like Albert King might have come up through there, or like guys like that, which it doesn't get more legit than that. And then when Mel Brown kind of came there and stayed in town, I think people got a taste of for like the real deal blues. So that definitely, I think, built the blues scene there. And there used to be a lot of live music. Like there was great other bands that weren't blues bands as well. There's a period there, like what were they? Rob Zabo and
Steve
Patty
Strongman.
Flynn. Yeah, Steve Strongman was in that too. What was the? I can't believe I'm blanking on the name. Anyway, they were like a funk trio. But there was a bunch of great bands. There was a really vibrant music scene in Kitchener for a while. I mean, and there's lots of different types of music. There was jazz bands playing, funk bands. There was lots of blues stuff. So I think there was a lot of music there. I don't really know why, other than, like I said, the Pop the Gator and Mel Brown coming to town kind of developed that. And then I think a lot of people like Steve Strongman and like Sean Kellerman and guys like that kind of came out of that tradition a little bit.
So, at what point did you think this is something you wanted to pursue seriously?
Um, I guess when I made the conscious decision that is what I want to do is when I went to college. I went to Humber College to study music. And so that was kind of like, I think I was always really, really into it. I spent like all day, every day playing guitar in my parents' basement. But when I decided that, yeah, I'm going to actually pursue this career wise, that was probably when I did it.
Tell me about going to Humber and like what did you hope to get out of Humber other than just to become a better musician? But were there things that you were hoping to get by attending Humber College?
Again, I probably wasn't that goal oriented. I really was just about I wanted to learn to play better, and I really thought that when you see people that like jazz players or fusion players, they really play a more complicated harmony than I could play at that time. They always play interesting chords, interesting, notes and scales. So I wanted to kind of learn a bit of that, and it just seemed like that was the next step that you go to, college, and I'm sure it still is. It was a very highly regarded college for music. Um, and a friend of mine had gone there the year before and really liked it. So I decided I would do that. And actually, I had a really funny experience when I getting in there because it was audition based, right? So you had to go in and it was really an intimidating thing because they had I think two or three of the profs there who were like super heavyweight jazz players, right? Like really intimidating. And and then you had to go in and play certain arpeggios and chords for them and like demonstrate your ability. And then you had to like jam over a blues with them. And then you had to perform a chord melody, which is like playing the chords in the melody of a song by yourself, solo in front of these people who are just like judging the heck out of you, right? So before you go in there, and it's really competitive. So I think in the year I went, they had, I think was it 500 people auditioned and they accepted 13 or something like that. And so it was really like your chances of getting in were pretty slim.
Wow.
So it was nerve wracking. And so before you go in at your audition, there's a big kind of seating area out front. It's down at the Lakeshore campus, which is an old high school. But so there's all these seats around this big square, and everyone's waiting to get called into the audition room. And so when I went there, I looked around and I could overhear some conversations, and there were some guys there they didn't get in last year, so they got put in a preparatory course that allowed them to kind of learn the skills they needed to then successfully audition. So I thought, oh man, well, these guys are going to get in for sure because they've studied for a year just for this, right? And I had not played anything jazz, so I'd like really had done a crash course on all the, a lot of the stuff. I was mostly just a blues and rock player. And I could hear them talking about all these different arpeggios, and they were practicing this and that, and about all this stuff. And I thought, oh my god, So they were getting their guitars out and they were warming up, and I was so intimidated that I didn't even get my guitar out because I was just kind of thinking, they're gonna, I'm gonna embarrass myself here. So I didn't even warm up, and then I went in and I got called into the thing, and sure enough, I actually played really well. I did my chord melody and I did it perfectly, which I was relieved because it was very difficult. And then, of course, they said, that was great. Can you do it again? And I thought, oh, no. So I had to do it a second time. And I think I made a mistake or two. But anyway, and then I jammed with them and it went fine. So, and then the funny thing was that later in our first year, those two guys that I did see did end up getting into the program. And I remember about like 2/3 of the way into the year, we started talking about the audition. And I was saying like, yeah, you guys, we're sitting there and I was really worried because you seem to know your stuff. And they said, what? And they said, no, everyone was terrified of you because you didn't even warm up. So unbeknownst to me, I was very intimidating to everyone else just because I was frightened for my life.
That's a great story. How long was the music program at Humber?
It was a 3-year program. I stayed there for 2 years, but I didn't finish it. And I found the jazz was not really the direction I wanted to go, and a lot of it was kind of in the direction of more traditional jazz. But I learned a ton there, but I didn't really know what I'd learned until years later. And one of the profs there even told me that, because I think I was frustrated with what I was learning and I couldn't apply it, and he just told me like, look, everything you're learning here is not going to make sense for like 10 years. So I thought, okay, well, I'll take your word for that, I guess. And it's true. So years later, it's like as I learned more kind of on my own kind of self-taught journey, a lot of that stuff all of a sudden started to click. Um, and once it did, I'm glad I pursued it and went and learned a lot of it.
Based on what you just said, is there a chance that perhaps there is jazz in your future?
I would probably say no, because I think when you're, as far as like technique or styles, sometimes you kind of have to pick a road to go down, and then um, you can either go further down that road, or you kind of have to back out and start at the beginning of another one. Do you know what I
Yeah,
mean?
yeah.
And so I think there is jazz influence in my playing, and I use a lot of harmony that's not typically thought of as being in blues or rock. Um, but I would think I would call that more fusion than real jazz. I really appreciate jazz playing. I love to listen to it, but I don't know that I love it enough to dedicate the amount of time that it would take to be good at it. Um, and I think that's the thing, is that people that really can play jazz really, really well, they have to spend a lot of time at it. Now, I spend a ton of time playing the guitar, but I'm not trying to swing over standards. Do you know what I mean? I'm trying to do my own thing and a different style. So I don't see myself going down that road. But I mean, jazz harmony is kind of, as far as Western music, is the most complex harmony. So you kind of study jazz harmony in order to be able to apply it to any kind of music, I think.
I wonder, when you said you kind of wanted to go down your own music, when did you know what that was?
Well, I think I kind of got back on the right path after brutally driving into the ditch, metaphorically. I think first, sometimes you've kind of got to hit a rock bottom, so to speak. And I had a gig for a while. I was playing blues gigs and stuff around a lot around Toronto and stuff like that. And on one gig, I had a keyboard player fill in for me, or fill in for my bass player. And he, after on the set break, he said he was putting together a band to go play in Dubai, and he asked me if I'd play guitar in it. And I thought he must just be, full of it. But I said, yeah, sure, sounds like fun. And sure enough, a few weeks later, he had the gig, and he was asking me to go to Dubai and play in this band. And so it was we had a few rehearsals, and we went there. Next thing I know, I was in the Emirates, and we had a gig playing 6 nights a week, 4 sets a night. It was a lot, but it was all top 40 music. So it was like, at the time was top 40. So like, club hits and some classic rock and stuff like that. And it paid well. It was great from that perspective. And it kind of, for me, it was like, success. I've made it here, at that age at least. And certainly it was a great experience from a lot of ways. But musically, it was just soul crushing, because I was playing all this music that I really didn't dig, and I had to do it every night. And sometimes I guess you think that you could do it and still preserve your love of music generally, but I found I couldn't.
How long did it take for you to
So,
find that out?
well, I was there, I think just under 4 months. I was there. And I think I found out after about a month. So it was, the last few were a little rough. But and yeah, and then when I came home, I just kind of found that I didn't want to play the guitar anymore. And I didn't really play for, I think, probably around 3 months when I got home, which is, for me, is unheard of. Since I was probably, I don't know, as soon as I first picked it up, I've never gone that long without playing. And I just every time I looked at the guitar, I just had this kind of feeling of like, ugh, I didn't want to do it, right?
Wow.
And then finally, one day, I don't know what happened, but I just decided I should play the guitar. Like, I remembered I used to love playing guitar. Why don't I anymore? And then I realized that I had always been playing guitar with the mentality of trying to do something that really wasn't important to me, or didn't kind of connect with me emotionally or anything. I was just trying to play stuff that I didn't really care about. So I thought, what would I actually play if I just could play what I wanted to, right? Like, and so I just started playing and not trying to, play a song to be in a band or anything. I decided, just for me, I just played. And once I did that, I just kind of rediscovered it. And at that point, I realized that, okay, if I'm going to actually pursue music professionally, I have to put the professional side in the back seat and just say, I'm going to play what I like to play. And then hopefully that'll be good enough that some professional success will come after that. So,
But I wonder how easy it is to know what it is that you like to play. I mean, is it just a matter of you play it and I like that, or do you know what I mean? Like, how do you know who Gary
yeah.
Cain is as a guitarist and a musician?
Yeah. I think that's not necessarily one thing that happened there. I think so. In that instance, it was probably just giving myself the freedom to say, um, stop trying to meet standards or be something that you think you have to be, and just like, don't think about it. Just what comes out when you just allow out what's there, right? Like, what's going to happen. Um, And I think with playing music and improvising and things like that, what's actually happening when you do it is really it's like your subconscious mind is really the thing that's playing the instrument for you when it's going well. Because when people that describe when you're playing and you get into that zone, the feeling is really that you're not doing it, right? Like it's just happening. And sometimes you'll play things that afterwards you're like, I don't even know how to do that, right? Like I don't know how to play that. Because consciously you don't, right? Because it's kind of like your subconscious has just internalized these things,
Right.
and if you get out of your own way, the music will come out. And that was kind of what I had to learn to do, was just kind of get out of the way without thinking consciously about it, and turning off the inner critic, right? Like right away thinking, was that good? Will people like that? Does that fit in here? And just instead just playing and not worrying about whether it's good or bad, just that it's honest. Um, and so that's kind of what I started doing, and that was my ethos. And every once in a while, something will happen that kind of pulls me away from that a little bit, like being offered a gig that seems really good on a lot of metrics. But I always just try to keep myself focused on the fact that no, I'm doing this because I love it, and that's the kernel of it. Everything else is kind of added onto it. It's not that the goal for me is not to turn my passion into a desk job,
Yeah.
right? It's like if I want to do that, I could go become an accountant or something. Although I'm so bad at math, I couldn't do that. But
But I wonder when you went through that experience where you just had to put the guitar down. I can imagine that might have been a little frightening to you, to have this thing that you were so passionate about, to have that passion disappear. What did you do when all of a sudden guitar playing didn't interest you for a few months?
yeah, it was not a fun time. And the other thing that happened there is because we were playing so much and I was singing so much, I actually injured my voice, so I couldn't sing as well. And actually, even at one point, talking became painful. So I was kind of a little bit socially isolated because a lot of my friends were out. Like, a lot of the socialization was happening at loud bars and things, and I couldn't really raise my voice to get over it. So it wasn't a fun time at all. And yeah, I just kind of just didn't play, and it was like a part of my life was missing for sure. But it was a part of my life that had gradually gotten snuffed out bit by bit over the last month. So it was kind of like, the frog in the boiling pot of water, where you don't notice that it's being taken away because just gradually it eroded my enthusiasm for it. Um, and then when I finally decided to play again, I remembered that, oh man, I love this. I absolutely love this more than anything. But it's funny.
Was there a moment?
I remember being in the apartment that I was in and just picking up the guitar and just jamming. And I remember just thinking like, wow, like how did I forget that I love this? And it's weird that you can actually forget how much you love something, whether it's a person or music or anything else. And sometimes you need to be reminded, I guess.
Okay, so then you say, okay, I'm gonna play what I want to play, and kind of lose yourself in your music. How easy was it to find what that thing was?
Um, well, I think I'm still searching for what that is, to be honest with you. And I think it's kind of thing where like, I don't think anybody can really successfully say, here is my thing and now I'm going to do it. It just kind of evolves over time. That without you really realizing, you develop your own voice, whether you want to or not. You can try to imitate other people, and that's kind of how you learn to play, right? Is you find people that you really dig, and you imitate them, or you're trying to learn what they do. But no matter what you do, you end up just sounding like yourself, hopefully. And I think a big thing for me was, like I said, I was really into AC/DC and rock, and I went through all kinds of phases with, Joe Satriani and Metallica and like all these different things. And then I remember when I discovered Stevie Ray Vaughan, is what, like, millions of other people, of course, brought me to the blues. Um, and we were on vacation, I think down in like Florida or South Carolina with my parents, but they gave us each a few bucks to go to a music store and buy some tapes. And for some reason I bought Texas Flood, and I
Nice
put it on
choice.
yeah, you can't go wrong, right? And I put it on in the rental car, and I stayed in the rental car most of the rest of the vacation. So they were going out and sightseeing, and I was like, just leave the keys to the van. And like literally I was just glued in there, and the whole family was listening to Texas Flood the rest of the vacation. And but yeah, it was like being hit by lightning because it was so great. So that kind of got me into blues.
Can you explain to me what made it so great to you? When you heard Texas Flood, What was it? Can you articulate that thing that it was that drew you to it?
Well, I think part of it was his tone. The sound of his guitar was just like, whoa, like never heard anything like that. And then it was just and the playing. He's just such a phenomenal player. And I think some of the tunes, like Scuttle Button, is on that thing. Like he just played this blazingly fast stuff, but it was just so cool, and it just made me feel like just so excited. It just sounded like unlike anything I'd ever heard. And it's kind of like when you suddenly realize, like, oh, that can be done with a guitar. Like this is just a whole new lane that's opened up, right? Um, and I hadn't really had a whole lot of exposure to blues, although you could argue early AC/DC is blues, but
Right.
um, I hadn't had a lot of exposure to the blues greats. That was kind of how I discovered it. And then I think what happened with Stevie Ray Vaughan was that he was such a mind blowing talent and just such a breath of fresh air in guitar that everybody started imitating him, right? And to this day, um, tons of people do. And I think at some point it can kind of lead you into a dead end with him, because you can only imitate him for so long before that's all you're doing is just playing Stevie Ray, right? And there's guys who make careers just doing that. Um, and then for me, what happened is, and that's why one of the reasons Chris Duarte is such a big influence is obviously he's hugely influenced by Stevie Ray. But rather than just imitating, I found in his playing that he kind of took an influence of Stevie Ray Vaughan and did his own thing with it. And I felt like his first album was kind of like, for me, it was kind of him showing the guitar wood, like, hey guys, this is over now. Like here is me taking Stevie Ray Vaughan, twisting it inside out, and just, showing you that you have to do your own thing with it. And to me, that was kind of like a real changing moment for me, because just the way he approached the guitar. Now, I didn't necessarily learn a lot of his licks all the time. I did a few, but just the approach of doing your own thing, not trying to do things exactly the way they've been done, and just kind of having this breakneck attitude of just, going for it.
I wonder, now that you've gotten to know Chris, have you ever had that discussion about his approach to his music and his Stevie Ray Vaughan influences?
Not really, no. I mean, I don't really know him well. We chatted a number of times, and I know we've sat on like a set break on his gig and chatted about, the Stevie Ray Vaughan influence on him, which is huge. I think also with somebody like that, when they get compared to Stevie Ray Vaughan so much, they kind of start to not like it as much, or they kind of resent it a little bit, because some people can't tell the difference between a Stevie Ray Vaughan imitator and somebody that is influenced by him. And
Right.
it's a bit of a fine distinction, I guess, maybe to the untrained ear. But so I think he's more into like doing like the real rare Stevie Ray Vaughan tunes, but he doesn't cover Stevie Ray tunes when he plays. And I think that's a conscious choice to kind of avoid that comparison, which I totally get. But
So knowing those trappings, how do you navigate the influence that Stevie Ray and Chris Duarte has on you, and yet try to come up with your own thing?
well, I think the thing is, once you get enough influences, you kind of make it just kind of a big gumbo of all of them. So you don't end up sounding exactly like anybody. And at times you might play something like note for note quote of somebody, which is kind of like just a tip of the hat saying like, here, this guy's a big influence. But I think my own style on the guitar, just technique wise, I developed this hybrid picking, which is using your pick and your fingers. And another huge influence, Danny Gatton, is the guy that got me into that. And so that opens up a lot of different things. It makes me sound a little bit different. I kind of got into like some twangy chicken picking stuff. And so that approach, kind of whether I wanted to or not, makes me sound a little bit different than a lot of the guys who might just be flat picking a lot of stuff. But I think all I do is really, I move in the direction of things that really excite me. So when I hear something, whether it's a guitar player or anybody else that I really think is super cool, I try to figure out what's happening there. And then I try and figure out what I can take from it. And then that just kind of goes in the arsenal, the guitar arsenal, I guess.
Okay, so you decide this is the way you want to go. This is who I am. I'm going to pursue blues. And I don't know if you consider yourself blues or rock blues, but you start making a name for yourself. You do festivals across Canada. Then you wind up at the IBC. And I know that experience led to other opportunities coming up, like the Massey Hall gig.
Yeah.
Tell me about the experience of being in the semifinals at the IBC. What year was that?
That's a good question. I want to say 20 2018 maybe.
Okay.
28
So tell me
maybe
about that
26.
experience of being down there.
I was great. It was awesome. We had a really good time, and it's super hectic because everything happens on such a compressed time schedule. So like you get there, they kind of tell you you're going to play at this place, and you get up there and you've got 15 minutes to get everything set up, and the changeover. So the other band's scrambling off, you're scrambling on, and you get, I forget how long you get. I think you maybe get like 20 minutes or 30 minutes to do your thing. And um, anybody that's performed live is like, you can have off nights and you can have on nights. And sometimes you're really good and sometimes you're really not. So it's a little bit nerve wracking because you just hope that you show up that night, right? You don't have a whole set or two sets to work it out. You've kind of got to just, bang it out there in the first 25 minutes or you're going home. So, so yeah, we kind of got our instruments out and ready and just warmed up while we were in the bar waiting to go on a little bit. And we had a blast. It was super fun and we played well. Yeah, we ended up making it through to the semifinals, which was a ton of fun. The whole atmosphere is really great. Like people really, lots of obviously musicians and fans and stuff there. And it was a really good experience. I met some cool people and got some good opportunities out of it. And yeah, I would definitely recommend it to anybody that's thinking of going. Although I think it's changed because years ago it used to be kind of like more like amateur trying to get to the next level.
Yeah.
And then leading up to when we went there was a lot of like solid pro bands that were there. Like people who were regularly touring Europe were like, playing there. So it wasn't like, it wasn't as kind of amateur trying to become pro. It was more like pros trying to get more gigs basically, which I mean is fine.
Do you remember what you thought you were what you hoped to achieve with that, or what you hoped to get out of that experience before you went there?
Yeah, I really wanted to book some festival gigs and just start getting some gigs in other places around the world. And I never really had or I shouldn't say exactly, but I never really had a ton of success right around my kind of hometown area for whatever reason. I never really, I struggled to be kind of, I don't know, booked or promoted there in the regular channels for whatever reason. So I would get offered more gigs in Europe than I would get in like Kitchener, Toronto kind of thing.
How does that happen? I mean, how do you get the European gigs?
The European stuff, I just started sending stuff out. Like I started looking at people that were similar to me that I liked and saw where they were playing and started just sending out emails. And then also some people just found me on like Facebook and they would come across. It's just surprising how sometimes people find you. But the one year I really decided to try and make a concerted effort, I just looked up a bunch of festivals. I put together my best emails, sent them video of me playing, and kind of hope for the best. And then, of course, after the IBC, that really helped because then you have that kind of feather in your cap that it gives you a little bit of credibility too.
Okay, and wasn't it through the IBC that you wound up getting an opening gig at Massey Hall?
Yeah, we opened for George Thorogood and the Destroyers there at Massey Hall, and that was a complete blast. We had so much fun. And yeah, I had a bunch of friends came out to that, and it was packed. It was just a great. I'm sure you've been to Massey Hall before, right?
Yes.
Yeah, and I don't know if you've ever been on stage there, but it's really, they're really up on you. Like I was expecting like an experience of being at like home plate at a baseball game where everyone was really far away, kind of.
Right.
And then you get out there and like people are right up in your grill, like they're like there's a lot of eye contact happening, and so it's a little bit scary, but we had such a good time. And I have to say the crew and everybody for Thorogood's folks they treated us like gold. It was great. There was no like, hey, who are these guys kind of thing.
But it was through them. I mean, they invited you. It wasn't like some promoter put you guys together. They're the ones who said, hey, will you come and open up for us? Yeah,
this guy, Adam, who's the tour manager for George, I met him down in at the IBC, and then he came out and saw our performance. And so we stayed in touch. And then not that long after, he said, hey, we need an opener in Toronto. And I was like, hell yes, I'll do that. So, yeah, we went out and it was amazing. I think the only danger was that I thought I was going to probably hyperventilate about like the third song. And I realized I'm so excited right now that I have to control my breathing because I'm going to run out of gas. Because I had to sing these tunes with some pretty fast lyrics. So I just kind of had to calm myself for the first couple songs. And then, it was a little nerve wracking at first, but we got a really good response from the audience. Like our first kind of applause break, and that really made us feel good. And then I think we just, from that point forward, it was just pure fun. It was just one of the most fun experiences of my life. It was, playing in that environment. So
You'd hope that that would be the case. I mean, I can imagine, me getting up and getting so nervous that not being able to enjoy the moment. But to have that kind of opportunity to open up for somebody at the Great Massey Hall and to enjoy it must have been pretty special.
yeah, I'm really glad that we enjoyed it and we had so much fun, because it, like you said, it is really easy not to enjoy a performance if it's not going well, or you're too
Yeah.
worried about how it's going, and you're too concerned about that. But I remember in the time, I just remember I knew at the time I'm having a blast. I was like, this is the most fun. you know it was so much fun. And even afterwards, like, we were just on cloud nine the whole ride home to Kitchener. um but yeah, it was great. And I think that's the kind of thing that one of the most common questions I get from people is like, that are players that are asking me for advice, is like getting over stage fright and or being nervous on stage. And I think that it's kind of like anything else. It's like, you just got to do it enough until you get used to the feelings that come with it. And those feelings can be thought of as fear, or they could be thought of as excitement, right? It's a physiological response. And if you can kind of get into your head that this is excitement I'm feeling, not this is fear and danger I'm feeling, then you can really enjoy it and kind of use it to your advantage. So, um, yeah, I'm really glad we played really well and we had a blast. It would really have been a drag if we had, come out and laid an egg on that one.
But to also realize at that moment that this is fun, because I think
Yeah.
that's special to be able to enjoy the moment and go, yeah, this is great, and I'm really having a great time.
Yeah, because at the end of it, like, if you have one of these experiences and then afterwards you think back and you go, oh, wow, I just didn't enjoy that, right? I was too worried about all this stuff.
Yeah,
And I've had that happen a lot, like, not the bad thing, but it's like, have it where I enjoy it, like playing at a festival, get a big crowd, and just kind of having a moment where you become aware of just how great it is, and
yeah,
I think that's an important thing to do, not only so you have a good experience, but also just so that you stay. It kind of carries you some of the more difficult times, I think, to remember that experience. And
for
I think you
sure.
play better. If you play with a sense of joy, um, you're going to play better.
So if we go back to something you said before about not feeling like you had done well, or you weren't getting noticed in Kitchener and in the Toronto area, and I don't know if you would have the answer to this, but do you have any idea why?
Well, it's hard, because I think when you're a musician, just because you deal with rejection so much over the course of, it's just such a difficult thing, that I think it's really difficult to not just personalize things. Like, people that don't get opportunities or people don't dig them, it's hard not to make it personal. Whereas, and sometimes it's just a matter of like, hey, it didn't happen. So as I've gotten older, I think I've take things a lot less personally. But for whatever reason, I just didn't get the support from the kind of existing infrastructure at the time. And I remember one time specifically, I kept trying to get and I don't want to name any people or organizations, but there's
But you
some.
can if you want to. I'm just kidding.
Well, yeah, exactly. Well, in that case, here's their home address.
Okay.
Uh, but yeah, I remember trying to get a few of the people that were kind of the blues taste makers, or the influencers, or the people, the gatekeepers, kind of in Kitchener, try to come out and see me play. I booked some gigs, and I was like, will you come out? Would you, because to help me out. And they just wouldn't. They wouldn't come out. They just wouldn't show interest. And then I remember one night I showed up to load in a gig, and the woman from the organization was there. And I was thrilled. And I go, oh, like, she's sitting at a table, and I just bringing my gear in. And I was like, oh, hey. I was like, oh, you made it out. That's awesome. And then she kind of looked at me, and then I realized that she had not planned to come there. She was eating dinner there, and then she proceeded to leave before we started. So it just happened that she was there, and I was like, oh, amazing, you're here. And she's like, oh, crap. Like, how do I not stay now? And so she didn't. It's like, I was like, oh, okay, whatever. But in the end, I mean, I think, and my wife reminds me, she's like, you play better when you're angry. And so there was a fair bit of anger and kind of frustration I felt around a lot of things along those lines. But generally, I think I channeled those into being a better player a lot of the time.
Okay, so after having that experience of putting down the guitar for a number of months and then deciding to pursue your own thing, since then, have you thought about ever putting it down? Like, have you ever been discouraged that you thought, yeah, maybe I shouldn't do this? Or did that
Not.
experience change things that maybe you will never feel that way?
I hope I don't. There are times, and like, I mean, my poor wife, she hears it all the time, depending on whether I've had a good practice that day or not, right? But I'll say like, oh God, I have no business playing the guitar, like should. But I don't. I'm never going to not stop. It's just sometimes you get frustrated because you're trying to really go for something to make it special, and if you don't get there, you can get really frustrated with yourself. So I have a lot of those days where, man, I just, I'm just not happening today. But I never honestly think I'm going to stop doing it. I don't know how I could do it. I think it's just so deeply embedded in me now that I just would have to keep doing it. It's almost even not even for the music, just for like the mental health side of it. It's like, it's kind of my thing. It's what I put myself into to release whatever it is that you got to get out. Music's my thing. So
Is music your full time thing now, or do you do another job?
no, music's it. Yeah. The music's all I'm doing. So yeah, I kind of made that decision a number of years ago that I'm just going to go for it and just do music. And and it was going pretty well. And then COVID happened. So,
Okay, before we get to that, because I want to
yeah,
talk about that as well. But when you decide
sure.
that this is what you wanted to do and this is the thing you will pursue, and I know you said you're not goal oriented, but are there things that you want to accomplish with that decision?
Yeah, I mean, I think I looked at like financially, how much money do I have to make in order to be able to survive, and and then how would that break down? Like, how would I make some from gigs? Do you make it from selling music? Do you make it from selling T-shirts? Do you make it from this and that? So I've kind of looked at that and made spreadsheets and kind of just to give myself an idea of what's realistic. And then I keep an eye on like what do gigs pay, how much, a lot of, you can make some money with tips down here, which is a thing. So I track how much I'm making and from that perspective, just to see how it's progressing and how realistic my goals are, or whether I need to kind of find other avenues. So there is that. And I mean, you always have to think about that for sure. But then for me, what I really want to be able to do, I guess, as far as goals, I'd like to be able to tour Europe once or twice a year regularly, right? Um, and living down here, I mean, I don't know how long we'll be down here. Right now, our plan is just to stay. But I'd like to be able to come back to Canada and do some decent tours there, maybe once or twice a year, and then through the States. So if I can do that and kind of make a year of, go to Europe for a month every summer or whatever that is, I'd like to expand so I'm able to do that and kind of travel the world and go to different places. Um,
Uh, how much does your past experience in Europe help you achieve that again?
well, it's kind of been all over the map. So the tour I'm doing this summer is actually in the UK, which I have not played before. So I've played in Spain, France, and Estonia. Um, and and I'm playing in Spain again this year. But the UK thing, what happens? I mean, generally, what happens is you get offered a festival, right? You need a festival gig in order to be able to make the tour work because club gigs just don't pay enough to get you over there. So if you get a festival gig or two, they pay well, and so that kind of provides you with the cash to get over there, and then you can build a tour around them and kind of travel around to various clubs. And in the UK, they've got a really strong blues culture there, and I think they are amenable to variations from the old school style of blues. I think that's part of the frustration I had with trying to crack into some of the blues scenes, especially in my hometown, is that they were very traditional,
Hmm.
and which is fine, but I mean they kind of fetishize some of the original blues. Um, I think, and just kind of want to keep it. It's like they want everybody to do the exact same thing and just sound like some of the old greats, which I always say like there will never be a better Albert King than Albert King, and I think for my money he's the best electric guitar like blues guitar player who ever lived.
Right.
But that's it. That is the pinnacle. Like you're just never going to do any better. If you could exactly do what Albert King did, you would just have it would be a tie, right? So yeah, I think in Europe, my experience in Europe playing there is that the audiences are really receptive to you taking some departures from standard blues stuff. Um, and that's really cool because when you get a reaction, like everybody likes to think like I'm a rebel and I do my own thing and I don't care what people think, but getting a positive feedback from an audience really helps you, kind of propels you on, right? Like there's an energy in the room. And when you play for people and you kind of go outside and do something and take some risks and they respond positively and the energy kind of comes up in the room, it just makes you feel like you can then go a little bit further, and it gives you this, freedom. Whereas, rather than people sitting there with their arms crossed, staring at you, waiting for you to play, some BB King note for note or whatever. So I think that's what attracts me to Europe, is they're a lot more open-minded, I think, as far as what blues can be, maybe.
Okay, so you moved to Austin, and we kind of touched upon this before, but I'm more curious about digging deeper. You're a Canadian moving into Austin, a very musical town with tons of great musicians.
Yeah.
How do you establish yourself and make yourself known?
Well, I just kind of did the same approach that I did back home, as I just started sending out emails, trying to get gigs. And it started out kind of playing a few places that weren't the greatest, but I started playing, and I just started connecting with people. People would see me out at a gig, and then they'd kind of, start following me, keep track. They'd come out to the next gig. They'd bring out friends of theirs, stuff like that. And then I started meeting musicians. And then recently what's happened is a lot of musicians here have started coming out to some of my shows. So I've met a lot of guitar players, things like that. And I started connecting with some of the venue owners that are really about music, curating music for their audience, where there's a lot of bars, especially downtown in Austin, where there used to be a really good music scene, where now it's basically like classic rock top 40 cover bands, and you're just playing for drunk college kids who are there to, get drunk and meet each other, basically. And so there's not really much viable down there as far as doing original stuff. But outside of that, there are a lot of places that people have where that's what they want. They want you to come and do your thing, right? They don't want you to come there and be anything else than what you are. And that's great. And they appreciate it. So once you start connecting with those venues, they want to have you back, and they're following. They'll have a following there too, right? That go to that venue because they know they bring in music that's not, classic rock or just people doing the same old thing. And that's great. So there's a lot of music lovers down here too, and great musicians too.
When I look on your website, there are a number of gigs in and around various parts of Texas.
Yeah.
So is the idea to keep expanding that geography, the places that you visit? And
well, yeah, within reason. I mean, I'll play anywhere. In Austin, we play like Houston would be like 2.5 or 3 hours, and we'll go there. We'll drive that out and back in a night if we have to. So yeah, I'm playing kind of locally here, and that's the way to do it. I think is you have to have a number of gigs where you play locally to keep yourself busy, and keep me in enough craft dinner and and rice-a-roni to survive. But and then when you build tours, it really comes down to festivals or those types of things. So my hope is that as time goes on, and I'm doing some gigs like I'm playing a festival in Kentucky and playing in Nashville on my way back to Canada to then play some gigs. So my hope is just to get some decent paying festival gigs elsewhere in the States that I can build tours around and start to develop a little circuit in that area so that I can go back there every, say, 3 months and have a bit of a draw. And then I think once you build up those little regional circuits, you can kind of rely on going there and having a crowd.
Do you have an agent?
I don't. I'm basically no. I have a publicist, but I have an agent. Everything else I'm just kind of doing on my own, which I think is. I mean, on one hand, it's kind of good that you do every job so you know how they're done, I guess. So you know if somebody else is doing a good job at them. But just the scale of things and how difficult it is financially to get by as a musician, I'm trying to keep all of it as small as I can without, inflating too much with agents and things like that. And I find that people don't mind dealing directly with you, so right now it's working for me. I'm certainly, if there's any agents out there listening, I'm I'm certainly amenable, but right now I'm just kind of doing it on my own, doing all the booking.
Just the fact that you know how to use a spreadsheet tells me that you're smarter than the average bear. So
well, I come by
you
it
have
honestly,
some business sense.
Yeah, maybe. My dad, we kind of a joke in my family. My dad is he makes spreadsheets for everything. So like growing up, it was like, no matter what the issue was, it was like, oh, I better make a spreadsheet. So I come by that very honestly.
Okay. So you moved down there. I don't know. You were down there for a couple of years before the pandemic.
Yeah, I think full time I was maybe down here like a year and change. Yeah. And then before the pandemic hit.
You had already released your first album.
Yeah, I released that before I moved down to Austin.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you go down there, you're trying to establish your name, and all of a sudden this evil thing happens. How do you deal with that? What does that do to you?
Well, yeah, it was very disappointing because I had the whole tour in the UK booked, and it takes so much work to put that together. Just the emails and organizing logistics and like, trying to map it all out and the routing and all that stuff. So I had everything booked and was ready to go, and then COVID happened, and of course everything started canceling. So I think at that point I forget how many gigs I had, but it was like I think it was just over 40 that I had to cancel, as far as because I had tours of like Eastern Canada, I had tours of the UK, and then I was just trying to route down through Maine. Like I had a whole my summer was going to be epic, and it was really going to be my best year ever, and then it was so disappointing. I think the thing is we just kept reminding ourselves that like we didn't catch it. We're not nobody we knew died, which was really nice. Like I mean, so we're lucky that way.
Right.
And I guess the silver lining of not being able to gig is I didn't have to do any of the booking emails, which takes a lot of time. So I basically just had nothing to do but practice the guitar and do some writing. So I literally was practicing like 8 to 10 hours a day again, right? Which I hadn't done since I was probably, I don't know, 13 years old. And so I just dove right back into the guitar. And for me, it kind of preserved my sanity because I didn't get too down on things because I was really enjoying the guitar and really delving back into it. And it kind of took the pressure off too because there's nothing I could do, right? I couldn't do anything. There's no gigs to book, so it wasn't like I was worried that I wasn't hitting any goals because there was no goals to hit. So I guess that's the glass half
Well,
full.
yeah, and at the same
Yeah.
time, you come up with another album's worth of material.
Yeah, and so the thing was, I was kind of planning on doing another album, and I'd been planning for a while, but then COVID hit, and I thought, well, there's no point in releasing an album in the middle of a pandemic when you can't go out and tour with it. So, but I thought, well, at first I was gonna do an EP, like just maybe 5 or 6 tunes, and then I just kind of kept writing, and I ended up with enough tunes for a full album. So yeah, I thought, well, I'm stuck at home with COVID. I'll just practice my butt off. I'm gonna write and record this album, get it done, and when things seem to be coming out of the pandemic, I'll have an album I can put out there and go hopefully tour again. So that's kind of where we are now. I hope it's over. I hope it doesn't come back.
So the album is called Next Stop, and it's coming out in a few weeks.
Yeah, so May 6th.
And so tell me about that album. Other than the fact that this is you woodshedding in the basement or whatever during the pandemic, how is it? What does it mean to you to release this album? What does the album mean to you?
Yeah, well, I for a while I didn't have a title for it, and I was kind of trying to pick a song off it to figure out what I would name it. And then, well, one day we're just driving past a bus stop that's near us, which is actually where I got the photo taken for the cover. And it just that the phrase "next stop" popped in my head, and I thought that's kind of indicative of where I'm at right now. Is that this album is the next stop for me stylistically, but we've moved into another country. This is kind of our next stop in life. And I also kind of thought like I'm ready to kind of take a step up in my career, and hopefully this is going to be the next stop on an ongoing journey. Not the last stop, hopefully. If my next
Just the
album is
next
called
one.
Last, yeah, if my next album is called Laugh Stop, you'll know there's something's gone horribly wrong. And then maybe it'll be called Just Stop. Maybe that's what people tell me is Just Stop. But yeah, so that's kind of the ethos for it. And yeah, on it, I kind of just decided to write a lot of songs that were about the experience. I didn't write songs about COVID itself because I didn't really find that was something I even wanted to kind of discuss. But I wrote a lot of it about just kind of some of it songs are about my experience of trying to be a musician, that kind of journey, and then I just tried to put in a lot of passion into it. So I really tried to play my ass off on it. Basically, is what I wanted to do. So it's definitely blues. I think I am blues, but everyone defines it differently. But I know my publicist heard it. She thought it sounds like hard blues rock is what she thought it was. And I don't know if it's that, but there's some funky tunes, there's some twangy tunes, there's some bluesy stuff, some kind of gospel, for me at least, gospel inspired stuff, and some straight ahead kind of rock and roll stuff. So I really didn't want to stick with one stylistic aesthetic. I just wanted to play, like I said, do my thing, and whether or not this fits the mold of what is easily categorizable, it's all honest, basically. It's all genuine.
And what's it like when you know, and because you've lived with these songs for a while now, and
Yeah.
now the pandemic's hopefully over, you've decided to release it, but there's this time lag between what you wrote and when you recorded it, and when you put together the album, and you're just waiting for the album to come out. What does that anticipation feel like?
Um, right now, I think it's a mix of excitement and anxiety. I think most of my anxiety is around whether COVID's going to rear its head again, and like what do we do if we're in the middle of the UK tour and one of us gets COVID? Like, what happens then, right? Like,
Yeah.
all these things. There's a lot of potentially terrible things that could happen. Um, but I'm really excited because I think it's a really good album. I work really hard on it. I'm excited to have some new music to play. Because it's been too long since my first one. It had been too long before COVID, but then when COVID hit, that kind of just derailed that plan. And I think, yeah, it's interesting. I think I've become a very different player now than I was back when I did the last one. And
Can I ask you
yeah,
in what way?
um, well, I've gotten to a lot of different, just like from a kind of musical nerd aspect. I've gotten in some different tonalities and things. I've really gotten into some different players. I've became a real big Scott Henderson fan. I got into some diminished scale stuff that I really have a good time with, and I've really got into different rhythmic syncopations and rhythmic kind of displacements and things like that. Playing pitting different subdivisions against different times, so that kind of stuff. So I feel like it's a little bit more evolved from that perspective rhythmically, and I just think I'm a better player. I think I've got more freedom on the instrument now, so I think what I've done on this album is just a little there's a little bit more range on it. I can kind of go for it a bit more and get myself into enough trouble that hopefully I can get myself out of.
And you're coming back to Kitchener to play, right? Or Waterloo, somewhere around there?
I am, yeah. I'm going to Waterloo. I'm doing kind of my Canadian album launch there, June 23rd at the Jazz Room there in Waterloo, and it'll be great. Like I said, I didn't have a whole lot of luck, uh, hometown luck and stuff like that before, but I've got a lot of support there now. I just couldn't get it through the regular channels. I think that was the thing, and I've had a lot of people say that to me before. Like, I don't know why they didn't, this that, but there's enough there's enough people there that are come out to support me and stuff like that that I love coming back now and playing. I'm really looking forward to that one.
Had you been back at all since pandemic?
We went back. I think we've been back 2 times for visit. Our timing was terrible though. Every time we went back to Canada, the pandemic just like hit again in Canada. So like it wasn't us bringing it, but yeah, it got bad. So we showed up and like the next day they locked everything down. So we couldn't like
Mm.
visit with our friends and everything. So, um, but yeah, it's always great to go home and obviously see friends and family and stuff, and then um, and play for people that you haven't seen for a long time. So I'm really looking forward to that. So we'll do a bunch of shows there. We're going to do that one in Waterloo, and then I'll do like Toronto and a few other places, Ontario. And then I'm playing the Donnacona Blues Festival in Quebec
Oh, nice.
in August after we come back from Europe, and doing a couple other gigs in Ottawa and Belleville and stuff like that. So
Wow. So, and this is the band that you have. Are you touring with the band from Texas or a different band?
no, I'm actually playing with my former bandmates in Canada. So the guys that I played with in Canada, we played a lot together. I had a regular band, and when I moved to Austin, obviously that they came down actually just for a trip, and they played a few gigs with me down there. But I've got an Austin band, and so in the UK, I'm playing with my Canadian band. I'm playing the Canadian gigs, and they're coming to the UK. Just because I'd already booked the last UK tour with them, so I thought we'll keep it that way. And then the drummer from Austin is actually playing the Spain gigs with me. It's kind of a complicated this summer. When I look at the logistics of this summer, it is a nightmare, but hopefully it's all going to work out.
But on the other hand, if you got it to a point where you can go to like different bands in different continents, that would be ideal, wouldn't it?
It is pretty great. I mean, that's the thing that's so challenging is that if you travel with a band, like a lot of guys, they will just have people in an area that they can play with. And
Yeah.
it's always nice to play with the same people because you learn each other, you're familiar with each other, the songs evolve and get better. And it's just a great thing. And especially if you have a good relationship and a good hang in the van with people, that's like half the battle, right? Like the guys, my Canadian guys, Don and Tom, we just laughed like nonstop. We'd be on like a 6-hour drive, and we'd just be laughing the whole time, just like, driving through Iowa cornfields for 6 hours, and we would be just laughing. The number of corn jokes that were made was, quite disturbing. But so that's a factor. But the reality of it is it is tough to pay for hotels and all this stuff. So some people you show up in a place. Like some guys will tour Europe and they'll just get local players there to play. And I'm certainly wouldn't be against doing that. It just comes down to what can you afford to do.
Yeah. And it really isn't the same if it's not your band, right?
Yeah, because especially if you have original music that's got stops and different things in it that you really want people to learn, that has some some subtleties to it that people really need to know the tunes. It's not like you can go over to Europe and rehearse for 3 weeks before you set that out. So you really have to find good guys that will take the time to learn your tunes, and then I guess the first few gigs you just kind of see to the pants it, and then learn on the job kind of thing. So
well, it's been a real pleasure meeting you. Thank you so much for reaching out, and I've enjoyed listening to your new album, and people should check it out. Thank you so much for doing this.
Hey, thank you. Like I said, I really dig your show, so I always like to hear conversations with musicians that are in a similar boat as I am, or slightly different, and hear their honest take on what it's like for them. I think it's great as a musician to hear that kind of stuff. So,
well, best of luck with the new album, and let's stay in touch.
Yeah, thanks, man. I'm going to be in Toronto at some point playing a gig. So if you're a Toronto guy, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So if you're around, keep an eye out. I think it's June 24th. I think we're down at the Linsmore on Danforth.
Oh, okay.
So if you're in the neighborhood, swing on by.
Definitely will. Thank you so
much. All right,
much.
cool, man. Thank you.
Hey, take care.